Awesome.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so like my journey with learning to understand my neurology, my autism. Although I wouldn't really say it was my autism, myself, journey understanding
Hmm.
myself, which includes the autism neurotype and the ADHD neurotype. Um, as I've been going through this journey of exploring and learning to understand myself better, it's been helping my dad. Like I've been
Really?
sharing things. Yeah, I've been sharing things with my dad with what I do and things like that. And there's been a couple times where he's just like, "Son, I think I'm autistic," uh, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And my dad is a pretty amazing person. Like he had a really amazing career. He retired a few years back. He worked for one of the largest insurance companies in the United States, and he was in charge of the entire Western Division
Wow.
and was very good. Was specifically in charge of the entire Western Division for quality control
Hmm.
on auto repairs. Um, so, like, he was very specialized in where he was, and he was very good at what he did. Or, yeah, was because he's no longer doing it. But yeah, um, and it's really neat to be able to see how that's helping. Um, and of course, I as I've been going through this journey and exploring it and learning more about like what is autism as opposed to what is autism spectrum disorder, what are neurotypes, what is this that we're looking at, the more that I'm understanding, the more that I'm realizing that this is probably not probably, it seems to be fairly definitely a part of our phylogeny, our nature. Like this is our genetics, this is how it expresses. Because I'm pretty sure that my sisters are on spectrum or have some other neurodiversity component that's going on with them. Um, I've been doing a lot of learning about my grandfather. He passed away before I was born, um, but a lot of the things that were being described about my grandfather, I'm just like, huh, yeah, yeah, that's probably yeah. Um, and really the only reason why I even got a diagnosis was because when I was in my early teens, I had a really hard time with learning.
Okay.
Um, I have a diagnosis of dyslexia. I didn't break the code on reading, and I didn't start fluently reading until I was in my later years. I think between 12 and 14. I can't remember the exact age
Hmm.
range.
Hmm.
Um, but when I was diagnosed, I received a diagnosis of nonverbal learning disorder, which
Okay.
turns out that's a common misdiagnosis for autistic boys. Had I been diagnosed accurately, the person in the area I lived was a specialist with nonverbal learning disorder. Had I been diagnosed accurately, I probably would have received the Asperger's
Hmm.
diagnosis, or Asperger's. Some people pronounce it that
Yeah.
way, but Hans Asperger pronounced his name Asperger, so I'm going to pronounce it the
Uh-huh.
way he pronounced it. Anyways, um, regardless, it wasn't until I was working as a special education teacher with other autistics that I was just like that's my childhood. Like this right that oh my gosh, that and then my journey to discovery led me to being able to get the questionnaires, pulling up my old individualized education plan. I was one of the first, among the first to be recipients of it because individualized education plans weren't required until 1999.
Hmm.
So it's like handwritten on triplicate paper, like it really old. And like I gathered all this information and I did all these questionnaires and I actually went out and found the official diagnostic forms for adults, because I had friends and connections and I was able to find that information, and I brought it all to my doctor and presented it all to him, and it I just laid it out for him. I said, "Doc, I think I'm autistic," and he's like, "Okay." And I said, "So what do I need to do?" And he kind of looks at me and blinks and says, "You did it."
You already did. You already
Yeah,
did my job
yeah. So
for
like
me.
that's but that so that was the start of the
And
journey.
how old were you when you officially received the diagnosis?
25.
25. And
25.
how,
I'm 38 now.
38. Okay.
Yeah. So 25, 26. I can't remember the
Something.
exact
Okay.
like roughly that time frame. Like I could probably pull up the records. I'm not very good with remembering dates. Although I do remember my wedding anniversary and my wife's birthday.
Yeah. And now your
And my daughter's
baby.
birthday. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
good at those, but
I
generally
get.
speaking. But like that at the start of that journey, like it was kind of relief because I was like, I know what's wrong with me.
Hmm.
Because my entire life I felt like there was something wrong. I always felt like an alien.
Okay.
I felt isolated and frustrated and like there were definitely things that I did that were adaptive. And I was able to get things done and survive, but it was a struggle, lots of struggle. Um, so then I came across this book titled Neurotribes,
Hmm.
and that introduced me to the concept of neurodiversity. Um, and as I was going through that process of understanding it, I started realizing, well, maybe it's not something that's wrong with me. And I went when I went for so I have my master's of education with administration endorsement. While I was working with my kids, my learners, um, I I kept on having really great success because my secret was I treated them like people.
Hmm.
I was a behavior special education teacher. 7 years as a special ed teacher, 5 as a behavior specialist. Um, and that's my main intervention was I just made a safe place for them. And I treated them with respect. But there were still some things that weren't quite clicking. So after I finished my master's, I looked into behavior analysis and I understood a little bit about some of the awful things that behavior analysts have and do. But I didn't fully understand it, and I'm kind of grateful I didn't because I may not have chosen to go this path.
Hmm. Probably not.
Um, like maybe I would have, I don't know, but like I went this path, and then after I came in, I realized so much more, and I'm grateful that I'm here. That's why I am love being a behavior analyst because the science is very valid.
Hmm.
Like the problem is not the validity of the science. The problem is the social validity of how it's applied. Um, and very consistently the dominant species of behavior analysis, applied behavior analysis, is not meeting social validity, which is part of the reason why I'm so vocal. Other reason is my neurology. I'm I'm pretty direct. I'm and sometimes people find that off-putting, but I'm just like, no, I'll be direct. I think it's good for me to be direct and for us to be straightforward.
Black and
Um,
white.
yeah,
Yes.
and is it recording by the way? Because I'm not seeing
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
okay on
Yeah.
my end.
It
Okay,
is.
sometimes it shows on my end when it's recording, but I guess it's not showing the indicator. Okay, cool. I just want to double check on that. I want to make sure that
Sure.
you're getting
Of
this.
course. Of course.
Um,
Uh, but back then, like you did your bachelor's degree that usually in the
mhm,
US it's a more general course because here in Brazil it's totally different.
mhm.
But then you went to your master's degree in education. Why did you
So
choose?
well, actually, my bachelor's was focused.
Oh, okay.
So I got a bachelor's in special education.
Oh, also your
Uh,
bachelor's.
yeah, and I actually got a dual bachelor's because I also have a bachelor's in social sciences. So uh, both were through the Department of Education for the school I went to, Southern Utah University. So with my dual degree, um, I'm certified to teach kindergarten through 12th grade for special education. and 6th grade through 12th grade for social sciences, which is history, sociology, political science, economics, psychology, and geography. But and I wanted to be a history teacher, and that's the reason I went for the social science degree, because all of those things relate to history. But I couldn't find work as a history teacher. I've taught a total of a year as a history teacher. But there was such a need for special education that I was a special education teacher. And frankly, I don't want people to limit me in thinking of me as just a history buff. Like I love learning. So I wouldn't say I'm great at math, but I can do math. I enjoy it. Like I especially enjoy exploring math. One of the things that's most frustrating to me is how we think that math is limited to just this one little area of algebra and arithmetic and stuff. There's more to it than that. There's statistics and those sorts of things. And I'm by no means am I very good at it, but I enjoy looking at it and learning about it. I love science. And that's one of the reasons why I love being a special ed teacher, is because when I was working with kids and helping them, my job was to help close the gap in areas where they were struggling. And so I would collaborate with the science teachers, and I'd get to teach science, and I collaborate with the language arts teachers, and I would be able to teach
history,
reading and writing and history, right? And so behavior analysis was a very natural place for me to go, because what behavior analysis is the study of learning and how we learn. And it is a science. It's a very hard science. We have hard data to show that we can shape the environment to change behavior. And so I like to say I was born a behavior scientist.
Yeah,
because I just love exploring.
Yeah, you like science, you like the process of learning, so it's all connected inside this science. So I really can see, like, when you entered, you were looking through this lens. You were not looking through any other thing, like what will this profession do? You were looking like through literally this lens, I believe.
Yeah, well, and like I was seeing problems. I was seeing problems in our environment. I was seeing like as I dove into and started understanding neurodiversity, I was seeing the problem isn't me. The problem isn't my kid. There's nothing wrong with them. My learners that I'm working with. What's wrong is that the environment is not matching what they need. That view of all behavior is rational, it changed the way that I did things. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so very vocal and active about behavior analysis, because our field has drifted away from our foundations. Our foundations are that all behavior, all respondent and operant behavior is rational, and we shape the environment based off of the needs of the individual. Now, to push back on against some attitudes that I've heard from people, like, no, that doesn't mean that the individual should not have to learn. Because I've seen people who are like, well, yeah, but and they make excuses and claim that there is no need for learning or no need for X, Y, and Z to happen. And my response is, no, there still needs to be learning, but there also needs to be an understanding that, my needs are not your needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have asthma.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to use an inhaler.
I have asthma too. I get
Okay.
to.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So if we're in a class where our job is to learn how to move our bodies, and the instructor refuses to acknowledge that our asthma, that's going to cause problems. If we're treated like our lungs need for a reduced amount of effort is a problem by the instructor, instead of the instructor matching what we need, that's a problem. Except that even then, asthma that's not a perfect comparison, because asthma is created by some things, and there's things that can be done to treat asthma. It's actually is a dysfunction of our bronchioles and our lungs, right? When it comes to our learners and where they're at, like, behavior is controlled by three things based off of our science that we know, like phylogeny, ontogeny, culture, nature, nurture, culture. Culture is informed by those other two. Our culture is shaped by them, and our culture shapes our phylogeny, and our ontogeny shapes our culture. Like, it all plays off of each other. So to claim that there's something wrong with a particular individual and to treat them and pathologize them like they are the problem is completely counter to the scientific approach. And the work that I'm doing is me basically saying, you know, what if we change the way we do things? What if we treat the individual with that unconditional regard, positive regard? What if we create environments where everybody can thrive? And the biggest misunderstanding I see from people who are pushing back against neurodiversity affirming culture is that they think that what we're asking for is more. Like, they think we're asking for special treatment, and what I'm saying is, no, neurodiversity affirming culture is pro-human culture. It's what it's doing is acknowledging the humanness of all of us and the uniqueness of all of us, and that each of us has our own unique needs. And so therefore, I'm not going to assume that what is right for me is what is right for you. Instead, what I'm going to assume is that what is right for you is what is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to walk in with curiosity. And when I see that there is a behavior problem, or rather something that it's not a problem for that person, it's a problem for me, right? When something is happening in the environment because of somebody else's behavior, instead of assuming that there's something wrong with them, I'm going to say, hey, what's going on in the environment that's eliciting this behavior? What's happening that's making it so that that person is struggling? And then I change what's within my power to change. And I also ask myself, is this a matter of can't or won't? Because a lot of times with the learners that we work with, it's a matter of can't. And then now we break it down to, is it can't because they just don't have that ability, returning back to the whole lung capacity thing, or is it can't because they don't have the skills that lead to them being able to? Because I'll tell you right now, this is a little bookmark that a friend gave to me as a gift. If someone told me, Brian, you have to draw this, I can't. I don't have this skill.
Yeah, me either.
But what I can do is I can draw something kind of like it, and I can learn how to do this sort of thing. I can take classes to create something like this. I can expand on my behavioral repertoire. And when we're working with learners, we need to see it with that same level of curiosity of, is this a can't or a won't? And right now I'm working for a company that works with a broad variety of learners, but they specialize in working with learners who are high aggression, high self-injury.
Okay.
Working with learners who are definitely needing a lot. And we're applying assent-based treatment. We're using enhanced choice. If anybody knows about the two Roger Raman's research on his enhanced choice. It's fantastic stuff. My boss, Melissa Santacroce, actually, you can, if you go on YouTube and you type in enhanced choice model, Melissa Santacroce, the Daily BA, she was interviewed with regards to enhanced choice model, because like the work that she's doing, which I'm learning from her. It's fantastic work. And here's the funny thing. I started working with this company in January.
Of this year or
of this
last
year.
year? This year, okay.
Of this year. So I've only been working with them for a little, almost 2 months now. And the reason I'm working for this company is because I need to make some changes for my own health, and they allow for me to be able to work remotely as a supervisor. And one of the things that Melissa does is she focuses a lot on really training her people. So I did quite a few trainings before I officially started working with clients, or learners. And I went through all these trainings. And the funny part is the only things that were new to me with these trainings that I was doing on the PFA SBT approach, Greg Hamley's approach, enhanced choice, a bunch of other, all of that stuff. The only things that were new was how to collect the data. The rest of it was stuff I was already doing. Now, some of it was stuff I needed to improve on doing. Like, there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, of course.
But like, going back to the number one intervention or support I did as a behavior special education teacher was I created a place where it was safe for kids at a middle school. And for those who don't know, middle school covers ages 11 through 14, which is some of the hardest ages.
Yeah.
Like, all ages have their challenges, but
Yeah.
like that's where some big brain growth is happening, and where some very interesting behaviors are more likely to pop out. And I was working with the hardest of the hard of these kids. And I created a classroom where they were safe. And because I created a classroom where they were safe, they started to thrive. They started to want to be there. They started to want to be able to have they wanted to learn. They wanted to grow. And that's the thing is kids want to learn. Kids want to grow. You want to know something that's really funny? So is that earlier this week I was going through my old hard drive, because I was cleaning out some old electronics, and if you're okay with it, I'd like to share my screen.
Sure.
Because I actually found some pictures of my old classroom.
Oh.
And so like I'm excited to share this because so my classroom, I didn't call it Mr. Middleton's room. I called it the adventure room.
Okay.
So this used to be a storage closet, and it got turned into a classroom. So this is where the teaching happened. I had a couple desks or tables, and we'd sit around and we'd work. And during lunchtime, I'd pull out some foldable tables, and this would actually turn into a place where kids can come. And I had some cool stuff on the walls, right? But this isn't the coolest wall. This is the most boring wall. So this was my office door. Like, so there's a center area, there was a server in here, and I had to, like, it was kind of a little work area. And so students could come in whenever I need to do one-on-one work with them.
Okay.
But you'll see there's some cool stuff that was on the walls and stuff. this lid right here, for anybody who's looking at this, I found out that this lid, if you take a piece of wood and you bang it against it and then you start turning it around and around, it starts to ring. And so the kids like to play with that and do some stimming and stuff on it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and you'll notice this cabinet right here. This cabinet was filled with games. In fact,
Wow.
right here are some card games. We play Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
And of course, I filled the room with cool stuff like these cool pieces of art and systems of color and periodic table and some exploration. So then, if you keep on going around, this is my other wall.
Oh.
This is because the entire theme of my room is adventure and exploration. So go see the world. There's just cool stuff here. And there was the schedule that we followed. Wednesdays were a little bit different, so it was a different schedule. We had zones of regulation because that's what I was using at the time. It's a pretty okay approach, but I've definitely improved. And I shared some fun things. I like to show the kids that we can achieve, we can learn and overcome. So this is the school I attended, and
Mm-hmm.
this right here is the ranks and merit badges I earned to get my Eagle Scout.
Wow.
So that's me showing them that you can achieve and overcome, you can learn and grow. That challenge is not a problem. And then last but not least is this wall where I had my work computers and I had kept my case files, special ed case files, so it was locked down. But again, going back to this theme of adventure and exploration, these are tiki masks from
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii. And this is another Polynesian culture, or so sorry, Polynesian culture, Micronesian culture. There's a difference. These are coins that I collected over the years from all around the world.
Wow.
Um, these sculptures right here, I actually painted myself. I have one right up above me.
Wow.
um, but like just I tried to make it cool and interesting in a place, and I'd regularly change up the structure of the room so that way the kids would be like never know was going to change, so they'd be curious and looking. But you'll notice something right here. This is my favorite poem. And it's it's from The Hobbit. I can recite this poem from memory. I love it so much. The greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow is yet to be said. The chances and changes are all yours to make. The mold of your life is in your hands to break.
Wow.
And
Really
the point,
beautiful.
very beautiful. And I just wanted the kids to see that, like, yes, there's going to be challenges that you face over and over and over again. And there's also adventure that comes from it. Now, there's more to it than that, right? Because we can't control the circumstances of our birth. We can't control we can't control what we have access to and what we don't have access to. So we have to make sure that we're being understanding of other people. But at the same time, like one of the areas that I specialize in is acceptance and commitment therapy or training. And without realizing it, I was teaching those kids these skills, teaching them the skills of being able to assess what is actually happening and make choices, not to be bound by our experience, but rather to be flexible with our experiences. Um, and that is super important because some of these kids were experiencing some really hard things.
Yeah.
My favorite story I like to tell from my special ed days has to do with one kid. One kid who, when he came to this middle school, I actually started working with him when he was in the elementary school, because I was going through um, my practical experience phase for administration, when I was finishing up my master's degree.
Okay.
And so I worked directly with the elementary school that was around the corner from the middle school to get my administrative experience. And so as a part of that, I had the opportunity to meet some of the kids who were coming from that school to the middle school and basically prepare for them and help them to be successful. And this particular kid, as a part of the process that the United States calls child find. It was pretty evident to me that he was a low support needs, or some people like to use the functioning labels. I don't like them, but high functioning autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And that the reason that he was struggling so much and constantly getting into trouble was because of that, because the environment wasn't matching his needs.
Okay.
And I dislike the fact that we have to rely on labels, because the reality is that I don't think that labels matter. But humans are humans. We like to use labels. So as a part of this process, I was able to help his family to identify and get him. So in education in the United States, education doesn't diagnose, but we identify. So we created the identification, we did all the assessment. He qualified underneath the label of specific learning disability and also under autism. And so I provided the information to his parents, and his parents went and they got a diagnosis from the doctor. So he was identified as autistic. But part of the reason why it took so long for him to be identified is because his special interest is sports.
Oh. And everybody had those made up conception on that.
Mm-hmm.
Autistic kids, they don't like sport. They
Yep.
don't have the ability to.
Yep. And
Okay.
so he and his special interest was football.
Wow.
And he was very good at it. So American football, or gridiron football.
Uh-huh.
He was very good at it. And so we got the diagnosis for him. He got the need, so he started getting need, and things started improving for him. This is a kid who, for the previous years, was suspended at the end of the year every year. He never was able to finish the year because he kept on having conflicts. And he had other peers who came in. One of them was a peer who is autistic, or already had an autistic diagnosis, and he would be what you would consider the more stereotypical autistic. So he would flap and he would rock. And through sixth grade, there was no issues, because sixth grade is, that 11-year-old to 12-year-old age range roughly. And during that phase, kids are less self-conscious. They're a little bit more accepting of each other, but as they get older, they become a little bit more self-aware. So when we get into seventh grade, now we have our football boy, who becomes aware that his STEMI friend is a little bit different. And so, because he's aware of his friend being a little bit different, he gets a little bit upset with him, because he's just like, well, why don't you fit in with everybody else? Because I want to fit in with everybody else. And I'm trying my hardest to fit in, but you're not trying. And this is actually one of the things that I loved about my classroom, is whenever there was a conflict. Because that's the place where social skills are learned, not in classes. Classes are great for practice, and for learning the building blocks, but the conflict is where the social skills are learned. So football boy gets mad with STEMI boy and yells at him. And I'm observing this. And so I grab football boy, like, not physically grab him. I say, hey, buddy, come on in here to my office. So this is the reason right here, to go back to that picture. This is the reason why there's the do not enter, because that when the door is closed, there needs to be privacy, so that we could have these hard conversations and learn together. So we're in there, and me and football boy are talking, and I'm saying, your STEMI friend, you guys have been friends for a long time, haven't you? He's like, yeah, he's my longest friend. I'm like, that's really awesome. So what changed? He goes, I don't understand. I'm like, well, he's still the same person. He's still doing the same things he did. So what changed? And he's like, well, he's just acting weird. And I'm like, or maybe he's doing that because that's just what he needs to do to be okay. He thought about it for a minute. I'm like, did you notice that he kind of rocks a little bit more when he's feeling upset? And football boy goes, no. I was like, well, pay attention. See what he does. When he's feeling a little bit more upset, he starts rocking more. He has a harder time. And football boy's sitting there thinking. And then he goes, okay. I'm like, you know, we all just want to be accepted. And we all want to have the benefit of the doubt. We all want to be able to feel like we belong and we can be safe, right? Is that what you want? It's like, yeah. It's like, okay. So maybe you just need to accept him and love him. And I thought that was the end of the story. And I'm so glad it's not. Because 2 to 3 weeks later, during passing period, when the kids are switching classes, the teachers take turns standing in the hallway to monitor and make sure everything's safe, right? And I hear football boy walking out of the classroom talking to his friends. And I kid you not, he said, I heard this. He just needs us to love him, to accept him for who he is. That year was the year that my stemming boy went from being hyper anxious and struggling all the time to going out and hanging out with his friends who genuinely cared about him and invited him to be there with them all the time.
Yeah,
They were
that's
accepted.
huge. Yep.
They were accepted and included. The environment changed because they learned, the kids learned how to accept, and the kids who were struggling learned that they could be safe. We all want a voice. We all want to be accepted. We all fear isolation because isolation is death. I was not an alien. I felt like an alien because I was alienated. Because I was treated like I was weird or different or not good enough. But as soon as I started surrounding myself with people who accepted me, which acceptance doesn't mean no boundaries. It's the opposite. Acceptance means I accept you and I have very kind, loving boundaries. So that's my favorite story I like to share. My other favorite story I like to share is about another boy, a different one. We'll call him my troublemaker. And my troublemaker was the troublemaker all the time in all the classes. He was not a special ed kid. I was part of the identification process and early intervention process because I was the behavior specialist. And so he was a part of our other program, our tier 2 program. So special ed's tier 3, and he was part of tier 2 because he kept on getting in trouble. And as a part of this process of being a curious scientist, we dove in and we started figuring things out, asking questions. And we figured out the main cause behind the behavior problems, the troublemaking, was that he wasn't getting enough food.
Wow. And how old was he?
At the time that we figured this out, he was 12.
Okay.
Okay, so he wasn't getting enough food. He was the youngest in his family. He was kind of the unintentional last kid. So there was a big age gap between him and his older siblings. His parents worked a lot, and there was a lot there, but it wasn't like a terrible neglect, but it was still neglect. And the reason I figured out that he wasn't getting enough food is because I went into the lunchroom and observed for a little bit to see how he was doing, because I was observing in different settings. And I saw him going around to the other kids and asking for their leftover food.
Wow.
And it's really funny. I did not intend for this to happen. This is a beautiful synchronicity, I guess you could say, because this picture right here, see these bags?
Yep.
Those are food bags.
Okay.
We worked with the local food bank and we set up so that in my middle room, so going back in here, in this middle room, at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day and at certain oops, I'm not sharing again. My bad. I'll share again. Middle room here, there were cabinets in there that were just filled with junk, and we cleared them out. We worked with the local food bank, and we kept those cabinets filled with food. And kids could come into this area during certain times of the day without needing to enter. So I would open the door and I would leave it open. If the door was closed, that meant do not enter.
Okay.
But if the door was open, and it's also openable from the other side, that means they can go through. And they could go through at any time, even when I'm not in the room, to go pick up food to put in their backpacks. So it wasn't just this kid who needed food. There were others. He was just the one who was having the most behavior challenges because of the not enough food. And as soon as we did that, we started seeing a big drop in behaviors that were disruptive, because the kids knew that they had a safe place to go where they could get food that they needed. But that's not the success story. That's the start of the story, because this kid had now a behavioral repertoire, problem behaviors or behaviors of note or concern. Most of those disappeared with most of the teachers. But there was one teacher that there was just no working. Like, he was upset with the teacher, the teacher was upset with him. But I want to tell you this right now. This is not a trash talk on that teacher, because that teacher was willing to work with me and trying to figure out how to solve this problem. If anything, this end of this story, this teacher is going to be a hero, because I want everybody to know that Mr. Hansen is a hero. So here's what happened. We talked frequently. I would come in at the end of the day and I'd help him with some cleanup and some stuff, and we would kind of debrief on the day and try to figure things out. And this is when I was going through my special my behavior analysis program. So I'm teaching as I'm learning, which, by the way, whenever I teach something, I understand it better. So I'm over here teaching it. I'm diving deeper into behavior analysis. I'm teaching these ideas, and things just we're having a hard time clicking. But this particular day, I was sharing with him that all behavior is right for the individual based off their learning history and their nature. And I shared that with him. And he was like, wait, hold on a second, say that again. So I rephrased it for him, because he asked me to rephrase it. And he went, oh, and that was the change. That was the day. The next day was a new day. A student still hated that teacher and still hated that class. But that teacher didn't hate that student. And by the end of that school year, that student loved that class and looked forward to that class. And that teacher had nothing but positives to say about that student. Not because he was trying to be this toxic positivity thing, but because genuinely they were safe.
Yeah.
And the change in the environment for that teacher was the realization that that student's behaviors were right for them to be free. So the teacher changed his relational frame theory, changed his relationship, the experience of the student being reactive to him. And by changing that relationship with his experience, he altered his own environment internally, verbal behavior, languaging. that relationship and then things differently, which then change the relationship with the change the environment physically, which then resulted in the student starting to encounter success. The teacher didn't have to use candy or token economies, didn't have to create these artificial reinforcers. All he had to do was create a condition where that student could success as a reinforcer. Acceptance is a reinforcer. Success and acceptance are primary reinforcers. So if we create environments where people can be successful and accepted, these so-called problem behaviors drop away. And when we do see problem or target behaviors, I like to call them target behaviors of note or concern because they're not a problem for the individual. The behaviors are an indication that there's something happening.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're still there. It looks like you froze. Okay, cool. All
I
right,
am here.
it updated. I just want to make sure we didn't lose you.
Sure, of course.
But cool. But yeah, like it's the application of behavior science towards understanding that this person is a person. Yes, we're a hard science. Yes, we are very much about making sure that we have solid data, that we're not being mentalistic, that we're being logical. And all of those things are being human. All of those things are essential to what we do. And our science has moved on. Like we're still growing, we're still learning. So our science now has a technology for understanding emotions. That's what ACT is about. It's about understanding private events. But it's more than that because I see people inside of our field saying ACT is not behavior analytic, which it is. It's a self-management strategy, right? But one of the mistakes I actually did a show that I posted on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok the other night on this. One of the problems that I'm seeing is that ACT is not actually used as a part of the environment. We're just treating it like another lesson we teach. But
okay.
ACT is a part of the environment. I use ACT every day, constantly, not just when I'm dysregulated, not just when I'm having a hard time, but all the time. Before we started recording, we were talking about baby.
Yeah.
Right. And I was using ACT to prepare myself for this change because now I have a baby girl. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks that she's been with us. And that's a big change. And I'm autistic. And everybody and their dog says autistic means we can't handle change. I disagree. I don't think it's that we can't handle change. I think that we haven't been taught how to change our relationship with change. And that's where ACT comes in, because I prepared myself by reading, by studying, on top of my own practical experience, because I'm an older brother, I'm an uncle, I work with kids, so I'm aware of a lot of these different things. And one of the things that I did is I practice some acceptance strategies. And this insight comes from my friend Ahmad, who I'm going to be presenting with in about 4 weeks at the Association for Positive Behavior Supports, their conference. So I said to Ahmad, is it weird, or rather I asked him, is it weird that I'm excited for sleep deprivation and poopy diapers that make you want to throw up? His response was so beautiful. He said, no, because you're applying acceptance commitment therapy. This is acceptance. You're accepting that a part of the joy of being a parent, of bringing a human into this world, is the struggle, is the inconvenient. And when I think about that, I go, yeah, just like I accept when I go on a backpacking trip or hiking, that there are going to be parts where I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to be sticky and sweaty. I'm going to feel thirsty. I'm going to feel hungry. My shoulders are going to be sore. If I'm carrying a big, heavy backpack, my back is going to be sore. But that's a part of the journey. And when I get to the top of the peak, if I'm going on a peak, or if I get to my destination, I get to see this beautiful thing. And this is not a complaint about our technology, because the fact that we can have this conversation is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that our world is getting smaller and we're getting more connected is beautiful. But I will say that this is actually an indication that we need to update our behavioral technologies along with our electronics and communications technologies. Because one of the problems that I'm seeing with our behavioral tech, or in relation to our behavioral technologies and electronic technology, is we see all these pictures of somebody at the top of a mountain, right? We see them at a beautiful beach. We see all the beautiful pictures of, the baby perfectly dressed up and cute, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the person who dances and they dance masterfully, or they play their instrument and they play it masterfully. But what we don't see is the journey that led up to that. And that's not a problem. That's fine. But what we do need to do is, with our behavioral technologies, is we need to integrate this understanding and teaching to children that the reason that person was able to go there and do that thing was several things, including to climb to the top of that peak and get that beautiful view. They had to struggle. They had to work through challenges. They had to ask themselves, is this worth it? And to keep going, even when their legs are sore and the shoulders are sore. And as we practice and teach these skills, and we teach these self-management skills, both to ourselves and to those around us, we start seeing that we start giving each other the benefit of the doubt. We start being more understanding and accepting. We start realizing that maybe the reason why that person is mumbling under their breath is not because they're crazy, but because something right now is happening that's kind of hard for them. That maybe the reason why that person hauled off and punched a hole in the wall is because something really rough happened and they don't know how to handle that. And a good example of this is a learner that I was working with who hauled off and punched the wall fairly recently, in the last couple of years. And when he did that, I kind of, instead of doing the neutral face, which we're taught to do, or instead of doing what everybody else does, which big eyes, a little bit shocked, a little bit worried, that uncertainty, I looked at him, I said, yeah, I'd do that too. I'd be pretty frustrated as well. And the look on his face of confusion, but also gratitude, because I was understanding that the emotion he was experiencing was because he had just encountered something that wasn't fair. And it wasn't fair because life can be unfair. Things don't always work out. And in that particular situation, it wasn't fair, but there was nothing we could do about it. But what was fair, what was kind, was for me, a person who was a part of his environment, to acknowledge that, to accept that his emotion that he was expressing was okay. Now, would I have preferred that instead of punching the wall, he did something else? Sure. But behavior doesn't come out of nowhere.
He didn't have the skills yet to do that. It
Yeah.
had something to be improved and taught.
It's a matter of a can't, not a won't.
Yeah.
And the funny story about that is that with that learner, when I when I stopped working with him because he graduated, people kept on coming to me and saying he's a totally different person. And I'm like, no, he's not. He's the same person. He just learned some skills. And it's really funny because the day of his graduation from that center, I'm going to give approximate age for him, between 7 and 9.
Okay.
So the day of his graduation, we have a 7 to 9 year old. We've got some emotional, development happening, right? I teach him these skills. He's learning these skills. I'm really excited because everything seems to be going well with them still. But it was his graduation day. We call it graduation, exiting services. We had a little party. We were doing a social skills group where we practice these things, practice social skills and all sorts of fun activities. ACT is incorporated into part of it. This is a part of his fade out plan where he started out with individual services and then was just coming to group, and then now he's done with group and he's graduating altogether. And we do a little dance party and have some fun. And the person who is in charge of the group, the behavior technician, he's a behavior analyst in training. He said, "Okay, it's time to clean up. We got 5 minutes, so we're going to wrap it up." And my little guy goes, I don't want to." And the leader of the group says, "I get that, but it is time to clean up. So we're done." And he just turns to move on with the group because he's leading a group. There's a bunch of kids there. And my guy goes and stomps his foot. Then he goes back to his seat, flumps down in his seat. And then as I'm watching, he reaches out to the table in front of him and he rubs his finger along the rough edge of the table. It's a plastic table with, those kind of pebbly feel.
Uh-huh.
Which that was one of the contact in the present moment skills that we taught, that we practiced, that he chose to use. That's the important thing. So he kind of, I watched him as he rubs this rough surface and he's noticing the feeling. Then he takes a big deep breath. He kind of straightens up his shoulders, sits up, and is back. He was human.
Past, yeah, he would had destroyed something, the wall.
Yeah. And or aggressed against other people, screamed and shouted, called names. But between the ages of 7 and 9, that is not only typical, that's very appropriate.
Yeah.
In fact, I know 30-something-year-olds who can't do that.
Yeah. Totally.
Right? And so it's like, okay, we acknowledged it, we accepted that he was having his experience. And there were definitely a couple people in the room that were looking at me, kind of watching me like, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
And afterwards we debriefed and they were like, I was really surprised. And I'm like, I'm not. This is what happens when we let people express themselves and we don't pathologize it.
Yeah, because the first thing that I see this in education. Oh, he does this because he's autistic. So he will do that. That's okay. At many situations, they think that you cannot do anything about it is because he's autistic. So it's just a circular explanation, and then they don't do nothing. And then when you see the children is out of school, especially when it gets older, when the child gets older.
Yeah. and it creates it creates a behavior trap where they can't succeed, where they struggle, where they're not able to be accepted and safe. So I want to point something out. And you know what, I'm going to go ahead and, if you're okay with it, share a slide from,
Yes, please.
because I want to. So most people don't know this, even though I'm pretty vocal about it. Like, I'm actually all for open educational resources. So just so you know, because I know you're trying to increase accessibility of these materials in your country, and
Mhm.
for your language, for people who speak your language.
Okay,
Um,
yes.
most of the stuff that I produce is open educational resource, which
Okay.
means if you wanted to take it and use part or all of it, if you want to translate it into your language, or like, please do it.
Okay.
And even the stuff that I produce that is copyrighted, like this that I'm about to share, the copyright is mostly so that people don't use it out of context.
Okay.
And so, like I want people to be able to have access to these resources. So this is a part of a training that I'm doing. Um, and so when we bring the neurological view in, because neurology is a part of behavior science. In fact, neurology proved radical behaviorism right. So it's a sibling science. So this is a very rough approximation. Just keep in mind that this is rough. This is factual, but it's rough. So we have our problem-solving brain, which is our upstairs brain, and we have our survival brain, which is our downstairs brain. You know, we also call this the mammalian brain and the lizard brain, although that's not necessarily is fully accurate. But the point being that this is where a lot of this is where a lot of reflexive or respondent behaviors are firing and taking place, and unless they get conditioned. Um, and then this is where a lot of our operant behaviors are occurring. And it gets even more interesting because logical reasoning is right about here, and right about here is where emotional reasoning comes in. It's kind of close, so there's a little bit back and forth. But we have our problem-solving brain, we have our survival brain. Well, our problem-solving brain, behaviors associated with it are connected, curiosity, eager, safe. So think Hanley's happy, relaxed, engaged for comparison. Okay. Contrast that with behaviors that are typically associated with our survival brain, which is very black and white thinking. Ambiguity is dangerous. Uncertainty and change are danger. This is the danger zone. This is where freeze, flight, fight, fawn happens, which, by the way, those are respondent behaviors, because respondent behavior is about survival. You see this right here, this behavior set?
Yeah.
People think that's what autism is. Black and white thinking, rigidity of thinking, uncertainty. They say that these things right here are what is autism. I would argue that what's happening is we're seeing the autistic person is not getting what they need, and so they're in survival mode.
Okay.
And I believe that the evidence, the research backs this up, because Hanley's research, Dittu's research, all the other researchers, both in behavior analysis and outside of behavior analysis, show that when you take the being out of a place of danger and into a place of survival, out of a place of danger and survival into a place of thriving. Thriving doesn't mean everything is hunky-dory perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, thriving means that you encounter challenge and you succeed when you
It's
encounter those
manageable.
challenges. Yeah, you can hit failure, but you're not constantly hitting failure over and over and over again. When we take autistics and other neurotypes out of those conditions of survival, we start seeing that connected, that curious, that eager. We see that flow, that desire to engage, because we shaped culture, we changed the environment. And I'm going to take it a step further, because when we think about it from perspectives of things like addiction, we're pretty for a very long time we were certain where addiction came from, what's going on with addiction, and this is kind of sort of right, but here's the early model of addiction. The early model of addiction came from, you take a rat, you put it in a cage, and you put in the cage a bottle of water that's laced with cocaine, and you get a bottle of water that's straight, that's just normal, and the rat will drink and drink and drink and drink the cocaine laced or drug laced water until it dies. Okay. That's where we got this idea that it's something in a chemical that makes you addicted. But then a researcher went, hold on a second. That rat's in the cage by himself. That's not a ratty environment. That's not where rats live. That's not what rats do. Rats aren't like in nature. They're not in this cage. They're in nature. They're around other rats. So he created Rat Park, a place where there were a bunch of rats, and it was a place where the rats could thrive. And then he replicated the experiment. Now that he got the rats in a happy, relaxed, engaged place, right? An environment where they could thrive. And he replicated it by putting the cocaine water in the regular water. And guess what? There were rats that would come and drink the cocaine water, but it was usually after a conflict, and they kind of work through it, and then they just wouldn't keep on going. There was no drinking it until they were dead. Because when we're connected, because here's what rats have in common with humans: they're social creatures. Rats are fascinating, rats, cats, and dogs, because they evolved alongside us. So they're kind of well, rats follow humans. So and I don't know if you've ever had a pet rat or played with rats.
I had a hamster when I was a
Okay.
kid.
I definitely recommend. I know people are grossed out by them, especially because of the tail. But like, if you ever get a chance to like get to know rats, they're very cute and curious creatures. They're fascinating creatures. I like to think of them as like a mix between a cat and a dog. They have some cat-like personality components, and they have some very dog-like personality components. I had some pet rats for years. They're very curious and very connected creatures, just like us. So there's a lot of commonalities. So to talk about a human version of this, in the United States, during the Vietnam War, the reports of the soldiers serving on the Vietnam War were that estimations were that up to 80%, I think, don't quote me on that number, I could be wrong, but a very high percentage of soldiers who were over in Vietnam were using hard drugs, not just marijuana, but we're talking cocaine and other really hard drugs. And if you look at the news media at that time, like, this was not something that was hidden. And there was big concerns about those soldiers coming back from Vietnam and there being a rampant issue of drug usage. Yet the vast majority of the soldiers, when they returned from Vietnam, did not have those problems, because they went out of the place where they were under constant threat, where they weren't sure who was friend or foe, where they weren't sure what was going to happen. Because Vietnam War was a very different war from previous wars that the United States was in, because you couldn't tell who was on which side, even more so than most wars. And really, we shouldn't have been there, in my opinion, but that's a different story. But like, it was very stressful conditions, and then they come home, and because they're out of threat and they're out of stress, they're now able to integrate back into society and be in a place where they're safe. Now, there was still addiction that came back. There were still soldiers who struggled. In fact, there's tons of stories about this. In fact, one of the more popular stories, Rambo, is about a soldier who came back and who was isolated. And one could argue that there were definitely very problem behaviors for Rambo. But even then, the behaviors were in response to his environment. Now, yes, it's fiction. Yes, it's a fictional story, but it's kind of based off some real things.
Yeah.
Right? Humans, we tell stories to help us understand things. So is it that there's something wrong with Rambo, or is there something wrong with the environment?
Yeah.
And that's where behavior analysis comes in. And we talk about three-term contingency, antecedent, behavior, consequence, right? And we understand three-term contingencies pretty well. We take our ABC data, we look at how the behavior is occurring, we hypothesize what the function of the behavior is, right? But what about the fourth term? What about motivating operations? Because we keep on forgetting that we have this research and we even have abilities to apply it. Emotions are a motivating operation, because a motivating operation either increases the reinforcement or punishment value of the reinforcer or punisher, and or increases the probability of a behavior occurring. I'll tell you what, if I'm angry, I'm definitely more likely to punch a wall.
Yeah.
And if I'm angry, or maybe punching a wall is not a good example, maybe I'm more likely to say something mean.
Mm-hmm.
And the reinforcement value of saying that thing, that emitting that verbal behavior, increases. As I learn how to identify my own motivating operations, and I'm able to identify the contingencies in my environment, including the contingency that includes my own emotions, yeah, I certainly can and do say things that I wish I didn't say or do. And there are definitely very hard situations I'm dealing with. Today has been a hard day. I've been dealing with multiple situations today, and I'm not going to go into details because it's between me and them, but multiple situations where people have made choices that have taken away my choices and have hurt me. In some cases, it's business. In other cases, it's friendships or family, right? But things happen, and I feel those feelings of frustration, and sometimes I make choices that I'm not proud of. Although I'd say that today I think I did a pretty good job, all things considered. Especially since one of my motivating operations is I'm definitely operating on less sleep since I have a brand new baby.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if I continue to return over and over and over again to my values, to what I care about, and then if I move away from my values, all it takes is for me to reorient it back to my values. People keep telling me that I'm really smart, I'm really wise. And my response to that is no, I'm me. All I've done is learned what I've learned with the environment that I have. And I'm trying to pass that on to others. I I don't want to leave a name for myself, or if I do, I want to be known for all my silly jokes and memes and puns. I absolutely love dad jokes, by the way. Do you know what dad jokes are? Do you guys have dad jokes
Yeah.
in?
Uh, Here we use some like an uncle's joke, like
Ah,
but it is the same thing. The
it's the
concept
same
is the
thing.
same.
That's what I want to be known for. I don't really want to be known for fighting against um oppression, or for fighting against stupid ideas or stupid practices that hurt people. Like, I'd rather live in a world where those things by default are already understood and we don't have to fight for that. But the fact of the matter is that I need to move towards my values. So I accept that, even though it's hard, and I accept that people know me for those things, and I move towards my values. And I also like sharing my fun things. I like being silly and joking around, right? And I like trying to help folks to see that the more that we can be kind, the more that we can be understanding, the more that we can create those conditions where people don't have to struggle quite so much. And when we do struggle, we can encounter success.
Yeah,
The more that the problems that we keep facing get resolved,
definitely.
the better things become for everyone. The reason why I right now am in the middle of the fight with ABAI, because of their practice of charging for access for people to speak, is because that hurts everyone. Is the $500+ going to make the difference between me being able to access food or housing? No, it's definitely a strain on me. But the issue that I see with that is that for me, that's not an issue, but that doesn't mean it's not an issue for somebody else. The exchange rate outside the United States is pretty high. For somebody who's living in another part of the world where that is a big amount of money, $500 is not a little amount.
No. For us here, for example, it is not. It is a big amount of money.
A massive amount.
It's almost 3,000. So it is, imagine you paying $3,000 for a conference.
Yeah. And then there's travel, and then there's housing, and then there's food, right? And then in the United States itself, there are behavior analysts where that is a huge barrier for them, because that is the difference between them being able to eat. Or just as importantly, as another behavior analyst, what if there is an autistic individual who is not employed, but who is trying to help change the way that we do things, who wants to be able to speak to people who serve his people or her people or their people, right? And then this barrier is put in front of them that says, you're not allowed to speak unless you pay this money. I'll tell you right now, it's already hard work. It's already hard work for me, even though I'm very vocal, I'm very skilled at communication. I've been told I'm a fantastic speaker. I love talking. I'm a bit of a windbag. Some people would say that I could have a conversation with a brick wall, and my response is, yeah, but have you tried talking to them? Brick walls are very solid people. This one brick wall I know, he's a stand-up guy. Told you I like those uncle jokes. Like, for me, that's fairly easy, but this takes work. It's hard to talk about the times when I've encountered discrimination, the times where I was filled with so much despair that I thought about taking my own life, the times where I felt so isolated that I thought that I was an alien. When the reality is that I'm a human, that we are all human. When I hear people say everybody's a little bit autistic, that bugs me. I don't like that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But at the same time, I try to listen for what they're actually trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really important. This is where analysis comes in, right?
Yeah.
What I think they're trying to say is that we are human too. And so my response to that is, well, no, that's not really true that everybody's a little autistic. But you know what is true? That autistics are people. That this is a part of our experience. This is a part of the human experience. Neurodiversity is my favorite way of explaining neurodiversity, because this makes so much sense. And I hope this helps. Whoever listens, please use this. Neurodiversity is biodiversity.
Okay.
When you have a biodiverse biome, it's healthy. It thrives. There's balance. There's systems and movements and structures. We have the food webs, food chains, all these different things. When we have a monoculture where something or things in the biodiversity are removed, making it so that it's not diverse. Banana plantations are a perfect example of that. We start seeing problems. Maybe there's something in there that's artificially keeping it that way, like banana plantations, right? You're raising bananas. You want to be able to raise those bananas. But then we have a vulnerability, the vulnerability to phages, to diseases that could come through and wipe them out because there's no diversity within the structure. Neurodiversity is the not so novel idea that everybody's a little bit different and that we all fill different niches within the biome that is humanity. And that when we accept that, and instead of trying to control people and make them fit into a mold, we allow for people to express and have that freedom of their voices, freedom of their actions, with boundaries. We have to have boundaries. There's nothing wrong with boundaries.
To live in
right?
society.
Yeah.
We need.
Like, but boundaries, there's arbitrary boundaries and there's boundaries about safety. It's like social skills. It's like rules. I don't know. In your language, do you have a saying, rules are meant to be broken, or anything like that? Anything similar?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to reframe it. Rules that are not responsive to the environment and the needs of the individual are meant to be broken.
Okay.
If there's a guardrail on a road that prevents people from falling off, that's there for a reason. It's to protect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be those people who want to go to the edge and look, right?
Yeah.
It's always going to be those people, and there's definitely some of the people that I know who are like, "Ooh, look, a cliff! I can jump off of it, or I can climb down it." Right? I know those people who are like that, and in those particular situations, I'm like, okay, if you're going to base jump, which is where you jump off with a parachute, like do it safely, please. We change the rule a little bit there. If you're going to climb down it, okay, can you have climbing gear so you're safe, please?
Yeah.
But like, if you reframe it from rules are meant to be broken to rules that aren't responsive to the environment and the individual are meant to be broken, then that's just another way of saying all behavior is right for the individual based off of their learning history and their nature. It's just another way of being behavior analytic. And when we create systems where people can thrive, people thrive.
Yeah.
And when we make those systems replicable, when we're scientific about it, when we create technologies where we can do it over and over and over again, flexibly, that's important, flexibly, responsive to the needs of the individual, we start addressing problems. We also get new problems because, come on, we're people.
Yeah.
We're really good at making problems.
Yeah. If everything is smooth, like, okay, we started creating some problems.
But at the same time, like, this is kind of what makes us cool.
Yeah.
Is we're really good at figuring things out, solving things, and doing things.
Yeah.
So let's embrace that. Let's create conditions where we can be more human. Because when we can be more human, amazing things happen. Amazing things like art. To be human is to be artistic. Anybody who's like, I'm not an artist, I'm like, then you haven't found your art form.
Yeah.
I've been told by people, Brian, you're so creative. I'm like, yeah, and you can be too. Just find your creativity. It's a learned behavior. Make those connections. Look for what works for you. One of my friends, their creativity is so beautiful. It's with spreadsheets. They make the most amazing spreadsheets. And I'm like, you're an artist. And they're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yes, you are. This is beautiful. And the thing is they create the spreadsheets not for other people, although they do, but because they enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's definitely challenge. And I kid you not, I have gone to them multiple times with, okay, how do you do this? So it's not, they don't help me because they feel obligated to, that because they're being forced to, because there's a problem. They do it because they want to be part of the community. and I provide and do things for them because I'm a part of the community, not because it's transactional, but because it's a privilege to be there. Because we have that core yearning, that desire to belong.
Yeah, makes us reflect on so many things. Like, for example, here in Brazil, like we are not organizing this environment for professionals to thrive because we usually don't have access to books because most of the majority of people, they don't speak English, and all the books and all the knowledge in ABA, it is in English. The exchange rate of the it is so high that most of people, they won't be able to go to the US and travel and go to conferences. Like nowadays we have online options and everything, that it's a great thing that COVID brought us, because after COVID that it started to be more frequent online conferences. But if they don't speak the language, they won't have access. uh, and also we have lots of people that they want to behavior analysis be a part of a small group of people. So in this way, only some will have access, and they will be able to charge more for their services, since we won't have so many behavior analysts and not so many people who what they're doing.
Well, then I have an invitation for all the behavior analysts in Brazil.
Okay.
because this invitation I think you're going to appreciate, and I'm dropping the website in the chat. I am the president-elect for the Open Educational Resources Special Interest Group.
Okay.
Open Educational Resources is about accessibility. Open educational resources, they don't have to be free, but we try to make them free. And to join the Open Educational Resources Special Interest Group is free.
Great.
It's currently a special interest group for ABAI, but in our bylaws, we specifically write in and say you do not have to belong to ABAI to be a member of the Open Educational Special Interest Group. We're working on expanding it so we can be a special interest group for other organizations too. I'd really like us to be able to be a part of the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science, because I really love ACBS. They do a really good job of trying to make things accessible, and that actually is in line with what ACBS is already doing, because a lot of their stuff is open.
Yeah.
So that part I love. And we need members. We need people to participate in creating open educational resources. Now, here's a plus for you, and I think you all will appreciate this. So we try to monthly do free continuing
Webinars.
education.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of them, when we issue the continuing education credits, they're both for board certified behavior analysts and international behavior analysts.
Great.
So if you're looking for continuing education credits and you're an IBA, we provide them. And I'm working on getting Mindful Behavior, which is a continuing education company that I'm a partner in, getting certified so that we provide the same thing. IBA credits, so that way you can get your continuing education through us as well. And yes, a lot of the stuff that I do now is through Mindful Behavior, and it does cost. But one of the things that I want to make sure that we're doing is always keeping in mind accessibility. And we're trying to figure out how to make things more accessible. We're trying to figure out how to make things cost less or be replicable. And I will tell you this right now, any continuing education presentation that I do any of the work that I do, I'm open to collaborate on translation so that it's accessible.
Great.
And when it comes to translation of open educational resources, I'll tell you right now, we're working on an open education resource for ABA for textbooks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're working on different resources so that way they can be translated into other languages. And we need help with this work. Unfortunately, it doesn't pay very well. I haven't made any money off of it. But at the same time, like, it's not really the pay that matters to me. Like, don't get me wrong, I like getting paid.
You need everybody needs. You have a daughter.
Yeah, I have a daughter. I have things I need to take care of. I've got medications I have to handle, and I also have fur babies. I've got 3 dogs. I love my dogs.
I get you.
But and there's other things I want to do. Like, I want to be able to thrive, but at the same time, part of thriving is also creating.
Yeah.
Is doing these things. Sorry, yawn.
No problem.
I hope it's not too late for you. It's probably very late, isn't it?
No, it is okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I get you. Like, this for me, this is really reinforcing. Of course, that it is a business for me because we sell products on ABA courses and everything. But we have the parts that are free, like this talk that we are doing, we will translate, put subtitles on, and this has a cost because we have a professional doing this and editing the video. So all of this content, it has a cost. And it's our students who pays and makes this possible for us to do this kind of content. So I really get the part that making things accessible. And what is your work? So what is part of your work, the main things that you do? So you consult remotely to do supervision for a company, you do some courses and webinars. What else is part of your work, of your job as a behavior analyst?
So my day job, I'm a remote supervisor now, and I work on assessment and training and behavior plan writing and doing all the behavior analysis. The company I work for, we have implementers. Those are the people who are there on site implementing. And we do have programming, but because I'm a remote supervisor, I take the data.
You watch the videos?
So I'm watching live and I'm taking data as I'm watching. And that actually makes it so that the implementer typically is a behavior technician, but can also be another behavior analyst. Like, they're able to be free to focus on implementing with the learner, and I take the data, and then of course sometimes I'll ask questions and I'll take some inner observer agreement data and I'll check with them, like, do you think that? Yeah. And we have like they have a Bluetooth headphone in, so that way they can hear me, but the learner doesn't hear me. Sometimes we take it off so that way the learner can hear us, because they like to, like, we talk. And we make sure that they know that they're not just being watched, right? But that's what I do for my day job. The other work that I do is with the bearded behavior stuff. I'm doing the live streams and the podcasts. I'm posting content and getting people to ask questions and creating conversations with that. I'm now I've been creating continuing education courses for a while now, a couple years, and I do those, and I've presented for the Open Educational Resources Special Interest Group and done those free ones. I also have paid ones that we do, and I've been doing that through Mindful Behavior and other organizations. And we try to make those accessible. And I was recently brought on as a business partner for Mindful Behavior. So we're trying to figure out how to make it so that the model is sustainable. So that way we can continue doing our work, but at the same time also get the money that we need to be able to do the work and make it accessible. So right now, I'd say we're pretty accessible. We're trying to improve on that. I'm excited for the website we're about to roll out because we're working on changing the website so it's a lot more easy to use. It'll look more pretty, and there will be some new cool features that are going to be included on that. That'll make it so that people will want to come and to be a part of it. I provide behavioral consultation. I do parent coaching. Some people call it parent training, but parents already know how to parent. I'm coaching them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm helping them. I'm expanding on the knowledge that they already have. So I'm a coach. I'm I work as a consultant for other businesses. I share my lived experience as an autistic, and I also try to help to offer this neurodiversity affirming approach, this pro-human approach. I'm currently participating in writing of 2 papers that hopefully will be published within the next year or so. And I'm also helping in another study, and I'm working on participating in others. I'm also writing books. I'm working and I have a lot that's going on, so I spend a lot of time touching on each thing briefly and just trying to very gradually moving things forward. I'm starting a bit of a speaking career, although career is kind of a big one. I haven't really gotten a whole lot of pay for it. In fact, part of the reason why I'm more than a little bit perturbed is that I'm spending money to go and speak. And then so far, every other conference has been understanding when I say, hey, I'm already spending the money to travel here, to pay for my housing, to pay for my food. Can you just let me in so that way I don't have to pay to get in? Like, I don't even need the continuing education credits. I just want to walk in, present, and walk out. If I could hang out at the conference and get to know people and learn, I'd love to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't need the continuing education credits. I renewed my BCBA certification in September of last year, and I'm already over halfway done with all my minimum requirement credits to be able to go. And right now, I have 0 issues with finding and paying for continuing education credits.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I need that. I'm just asking for the right to be able to speak. That's it. So that's something I'm doing. If I ever start getting paid for it, cool. I'll just turn around and turn that and get that money towards the things I care about.
Just for everyone to understand that, because not everyone is familiar with ABAI and the requirements. So if you are not a member, you cannot publish your you cannot publish some research, you cannot speak into the conference, just for everyone to understand.
And to be an affiliate member, just an affiliate member, not a full member, to be an affiliate member is 200, and it's more than 250. I can't remember the exact number, but 200. It's more than $250, which that's a lot for me. So that's got to be significant amounts for anybody outside the United States where the exchange rate's not in their favor.
Yeah.
Then to attend ABAI for 1 day is $300 for 1 day. So they tell me I have to be a member and pay to be at the conference. And I couldn't pay for my conference membership. I couldn't pay for conference entrance until after they announced what day that we were going to be presenting. So there was that particular fund barrier. But then the other side of it is just why? People are literally traveling from across the globe to come to ABAI, to pay and to gain from being there, to learn. That's like charging teachers rent for their room so they can come and teach students. not paying them, charging them. And that's an environmental variable. That is a barrier that makes it so that it creates bias in the science. The bias is only the people who have the money, who can afford it, are the ones who are going to speak. So it's going to be people who are very well off, who don't have the environmental variables that impact the people that we serve, who are going to be there if you're inside the United States. And if you're outside the United States, you need to have a lot of money. You need to be basically rich to be able to afford that. Because on top of everything else, then there's also travel expenses.
Yeah, that are like really, really expensive. And most of them, they will have to stop working in order to go. So they won't be receiving money and also spending money.
I'm going to be at 5 conferences between now and the end of June.
Wow.
I'm going to be at 5 conferences, and 4 of those 5 conferences, when I told them about the barriers, their answer is, okay, we'll help you out. Like, you don't have to pay to get in. One of them, well, actually, no, 2 of them, they're like, oh, well, we want you to be here. Can we help with travel? Can we help with housing? So there's a couple of them that are actually like going above and beyond, because I'm not asking for those. I'm just asking for the right to be able to walk in and teach and then walk out. But the only one that has responded the way they have is ABAI. What an amazing position of privilege that they can be in, that they can congratulate themselves for being inclusive and equitable and have diversity while creating barriers that prevent inclusivity, equitability, and diversity. So fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was sarcasm.
No, you were totally
Oh wait,
right.
autistics don't understand sarcasm. I need to take that back. I can't be sarcastic.
Yeah, you can. You cannot. You are not autistic. I just
That's my favorite one. You don't look autistic. I'm like, what does autism look like?
Yeah. And just I want to let you go because you need to rest and everything. But let's just tell a little to everyone about GRC, because
oh yes,
most people when you posted, I didn't know about this until you posted, until I discovered you on the internet. So I did the post, I did some lots of content back then, last year, about this. But I want you to tell everyone, so for us, and what ABAI has to do with that. So for just everyone has the knowledge, because it is a really prestigious association, and usually the professionals who goes there, they see it as a really good environment and a really good association, and we need to have a vision for all the contests and everything.
Well, so Judge Rotenberg Center originally started out as Behavior Research Institute.
Okay.
Judge Rotenberg Center was started by a man by the name of Matthew Israel. Matthew Israel studied behavior analysis. I don't know that he understood it, but Matthew Israel, he decided that he was going to explore the use of aversive punishment to bring behavior under control. So Behavior Research Institute, now Judge Rotenberg Center, JRC, they started utilizing some different things. And one of the things that they utilized was spraying ammonia in the face of learners, of pinching, spanking. One of the deaths that occurred at Behavior Research Institute was using sensory deprivation. And granted, this happened, I think, in the 80s. So we don't like our technology has advanced since then. But based off of what was described, it sounds like the person had an epileptic fit that was probably triggered by the sensory deprivation helmet, which was a football or rugby helmet, like that was equipped to block out sound and noise and instead play white noise. So basically, something was strapped over somebody's head while they're being restrained that completely blocks out all sight and sound, and instead it overwhelms them with the sound. And I can only imagine the terror for the poor boy who died as he was in that condition. Well, very quickly, Matthew Israel started exploring into using shock, electrical shock, to try to control and to consecrate or punish behavior. And prior to this, there was something called the CBIS. I forget what it stands for, but it used a very mild shock to try to bring behavior under control. And Matthew Israel was using that. Lovaas did some research with Ivar Lovaas did some research with the CBIS, and years later he actually expressed regret for using and doing that research. Which I'm not a fan of Ivar Lovaas's work, but I at least respect that he's willing to admit that he screwed up.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not expecting people to be angels because we're not perfect, but at least, try to own that you make mistakes. But because of the CBIS and the research on the CBIS, Israel decided that he was going to explore using more powerful shocks. And so he created something called the graduated electronic decelerator, which involves strapping electrodes, one to each bicep, one to the diaphragm, and one to each leg. And the person carried around a bag that was strapped to them that had the battery in it. And there was a radio signal set up so that when the implementer pushed the button, a shock would be randomly delivered to one of 5 parts of the body, one of those 5 places where the electrodes were strapped. And this was at the beginning of the Food and Drug Administration for the United States. And the CBIS was grandfathered in because it was approved previous to the FDA starting what it was doing. And what Israel did is, because this is, again, at the very beginning, this is in the late 70s, early 80s, is he submitted the patent underneath a clause that is no longer present in the laws, but that patent allowed for something to be approved that was equivalent to something else that had already been approved. So because the CBIS had been grandfathered in, he was able to get a patent issued because the bureaucrats at the FDA, who were already overwhelmed with trying to get things regulated, and there was other stuff going on too, because this is back in those days when people were a little bit less aware and concerned about safety, perhaps, it was able to get through a loophole. And let me look up the stats on it. Graduated. Oh, actually, you know what? Hold on a second. I want to give the correct the correct wattages and voltages with regards to the GEDs. So I'm going to see if I can find them real quick, because my memory is not perfect. I can't remember everything.
Of course,
I will say that the Judge Rotenberg Center has been ruled as using torture by the UN.
Okay.
So that is a factual thing. Let's see. If I remember correctly, the GED, why am I blanking on this? I should have had this stuff pulled up.
No problem.
All right. Well, I'll go off of rough memory because because this will be good enough. And if it turns out I'm wrong, then that's okay. I'm not perfect in the memory. But so there's two very important things to when it comes to electrical things. There's wattage and there's amperage. So you have high wattage, and high wattage can be dangerous, but only if there's high amperage.
Okay.
You can have low wattage, but high amperage, which can be dangerous, but the higher the amplitude, which is the resistance, the more dangerous it gets. So tasers and stun guns in the United States, the legal limit that is imposed by the FDA for those non-lethal weapons, they're not actually non-lethal. People do die from them regularly, but the allowed amplitude is 4.5 milliamps. That's the maximum that's allowed.
Okay.
The Judge Rotenberg Center, the amplitude for the GED is, I believe, 6 times that. So 4.5 milliamps. I think it's maximum 27 milliamps for the GED2. And the shock that's delivered, because they can change the shock level, the shock that's delivered can be as low as the equivalent of a stun gun or a taser. Now, an important fact that needs to be known is very brief, so it's not the same as a stun gun or a taser, but it's very painful because the higher the amplitude, the more painful it can get. But that's not the only device that they use. They also use the GED4, the Graduate Electronic Decelerator 4, and the maximum amplitude of the GED4 is 90 milliamps. Consistently, death occurs at 100. So what's happening is we have these people that Behavior Research Institute and now Judge Rotenberg Center serves, where there are people who have high aggression, high self-injury, and they have a history of violating human rights, of ignoring the needs of the people, instead putting them inside this box and using aversive things with them. Some other practices that Judge Rotenberg Center has done, I don't know if they still are doing them, includes contingent food access, where basically they have a nutritionist come in and they find out what the bare minimum that person needs to live. And every single time they see a behavior that they don't want to see, that person lose access to the food. And then at the end of the day, they're given a slop that fills the caloric needs, but that slop is mixed with liver powder. That's torture. But on top of that, people who have former employees and survivors of Judge Rotenberg Center have reported a massive, long history of abuse. If you want to read more about it, the book Pain and Shock in America goes into amazing detail, and it's fantastic research. And it's very factual. It's very much consistent reporting. And Judge Rotenberg Center, which was renamed for the judge who made it possible for Behavior Research Institute to continue. There's not bias there. Nope. No. There's not some questions of ethics there, is there?
No.
Super
like, normal.
Judge Rotenberg Center is now the only place in the world that we know of that uses contingent electric skin shock. There was a place in California, Tobin's World, that was doing it too, but California shut that down. It's not happening anymore. I think the organization is still there, but they changed their approach. I don't necessarily know that they're particularly any better, but at least they're not as bad as Judge Rotenberg Center. But in Canton, Massachusetts, Judge Rotenberg Center has spent quite a bit of money and power and influence to maintain their ability to be able to have the people there who are treated with contingent electric skin shock. And there's a very long history of abuse, of human rights violations, of intimidating witnesses, of trying to get them to silence them. And what happened last year was 2022. First off, in 2021, Neuroclastic which is the largest autistic-led nonprofit organization. Tara Vance wrote and published an article about surveying 900 behavior analysts about use of contingent electric skin shock, and publishing that article. And so what happened was in the beginning of 2022, Judge Rotenberg Center issued a cease and desist to Neuroclastic, saying that it was defamation and liable, and telling Neuroclastic to take down the article.
Okay.
Because they claimed that we were making false statements. Well, everything that was in there was based off of fact. Information you can find from court records, from the UN, from the FDA, from police reports, from all these different things. So, funny story. They issue that cease and desist. They name 3 behavior analysts who are quoted in it, including me, all of whom are autistic, and basically threaten to sue us. Our response was to kind of laugh at them, to publish that they published the cease and desist, and basically say, come at us. Now, there was one thing. The quote that I had was a little bit off. It wasn't quite factually accurate. I said that the shock was 10 times more powerful, which isn't factually accurate. It's 6 times for the GED, and 16 times more for the GED-4. So we did issue a correction where I corrected myself and said, actually, this is what it actually is. So, and that was more of a thumb of our nose at them, because it's like, no, we're just going to be factual. We're going to be super factual, actually. But what happened was that 2 days after we published that response, the resignation letter for Amy Odom and Jonathan Tarbox from ABAI was leaked. And we don't know who leaked it. We don't know where it came from, because Dr. Odom and Dr. Tarbox, when they issued their letter of resignation, they only sent it to people inside of ABAI.
The board members.
So we don't know. Yeah. Board members and state associations. So anybody that was relevant to. And the reason that they were resigning was because the executive committee of ABAI bypassed peer review, because Dr. Odom and Dr. Tarbox, who were in charge of the program for the 2022 ABAI, when they received submissions from Judge Rotenberg Center to present on contingent electric skin shock, they asked themselves the question, is this applicable to the field? And it's not, because the only organization that uses contingent electric skin shock, we're moving on from aversives. We've determined that they're not effective. They're for creating actual behavior change. So as a part of their responsibility, as part of the peer review, they rejected. And of course, because Judge Rotenberg Center is hooked up with connections and power, they probably went to somebody on the executive committee, probably multiple somebodies, and the executive committee bypassed peer review. And of course, Dr. Tarbox and Dr. Odom, who were responsible for this role at the time, they protested that. They said, this is bypassing our procedures. This is not okay. And the executive committee, or at least members of it, opted to disregard. And so Dr. Tarbox and Dr. Odom said, we're done. We quit because this is not in line with our values. This is not what behavior science looks like. And that letter was leaked 2 days after we responded to Judge Rotenberg Center's cease and desist. So perfect timing. So we made a big deal out of it. And a lot of people say, well, Brian, you led the charge. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I did not lead the charge. I was just a part of the charge. I was a part of the charge. I was a part of the process of trying to push back against this. Because of this charge, we were able to bring to light some very big problems within ABAI. Because of us bringing this to light, we were able to see some very clear corruption inside of ABAI. There are members of leadership in ABAI who spread rumors that autistic advocates would show up at the 2022 ABAI conference and be violent. They claimed that we would incite violence, despite the fact that every single person who was talking about this and pushing for us to go there to protest was specifically stating that peaceful protest is what we need to do. We were encouraging and asking people to protest peacefully because it was taking place in Boston, which is just around the corner from Judge Rotenberg Center. There were people who were also going to protest at Judge Rotenberg Center. And we also reminded everybody who was protesting, peaceful protest. So leadership of ABAI claimed we were inciting violence. Then, on top of that, when ABAI bypassed peer review, the leadership bypassed peer review, they made it so that that JRC could present not once, not twice, 3 times. They created 3 different venues where JRC could present. And then they created the special committee, or the task force for contingent electric skin shock. And there's one person in that task force that I didn't have any problems with being on there, but other participants in that task force had some multiple relationships, some biases that were questionable. And then at the task force presentation at ABAI, they gave additional space for Judge Rotenberg to be able to talk. So 4 different places at ABAI 2022 where they were given a place to talk. Furthermore, during the task force panel, when there were people who were speaking, there are several instances where the task force members tried to stop certain people from speaking, including in one case, a recent former employee of Judge Rotenberg Center who was there to report to ABAI about the abuses, not just contingent electric skin shock, but other abuses. And a task force member said, that's not relevant to this conversation. And basically the crowd shouted him down and said, let him speak. This is all recorded, by the way. We had somebody in there live streaming, and it's up on my YouTube channel. You can watch the whole thing. So you don't have to take my word for it.
Yeah, I saw some parts.
Yeah. So, you can see this. You can see what's going on here, and that there's some clear biases. Then at the end of that, Dr. Carol Pilgrim, the president of ABAI, who was going out. This was her last time speaking as the president of ABAI. She got up in front and she said that there were a lot of alternative facts that were being presented. Basically, she said we were lying. And yet all the facts that we present are facts that we took from the UN, the FDA, other court documents, police reports, whistleblower reports, survivor reports, and from Judge Rotenberg Center's own published documents. And last but not least, we tried to get, because the schematics for the GED and the GED4 are published, we tried to get Judge Rotenberg Center to allow for a live demonstration on volunteers, including myself. They refused. Because of that, we took those schematics to electrical engineers, 5 different electrical engineers, and we said, can you make this? 4 of the 5 said, no, I will not make this. This will kill somebody. The 5th one, 3 of these electrical engineers have PhDs in electrical engineering, by the way. So we're not talking some dude in a garage. We're talking somebody who knows and understands electricity well. The 5th one said that he would be willing to do it as long as we signed a contract saying we would not use it on a person, that it would be only for demonstration purposes to be looking at. That's pretty damning evidence when somebody who understands electricity to that level says, no, I will not make this because it will kill people. And Dr. Pilgrim said those were alternative facts and referred to the protests that we were doing as histrionics. So fast forward a few months to when the task force does their report, and their report is clearly biased. It's clearly biased because there's no meaningful interviews of the people who are being subjected to what's happening. It looks like a token effort. It's publicly available. You can review it. And then the task force recommends a position statement where basically it's politically worded to basically allow for Judge Rotenberg Center to continue doing what they're doing with ABAI support. But because there's a lot of pushback from the community, ABAI says we're going to put it to a vote and we'll present 2 position statements. One is that recommended from the task force. The other is we're opposed to use of aversives, including contingent electric skin shock, and this is not okay. And it's going to a vote. And people who left ABAI out of protest, who boycotted out of protest, they go, okay, well, I guess I can join back to ABAI so that I can influence, because this is where I want the field to go. Guess what ABAI did? Wow. They changed the goalpost. They said that you could not vote on it unless you were a member the previous year.
Oh, okay.
But they changed the goalpost again, too. They also said you could only vote if you were a full member.
Oh, so affiliate members cannot vote.
Yep, they made it so affiliate members could not vote. But it gets better.
No.
Because if this isn't bad enough, I had an anonymous report come to me, and I consider myself a reporter. I protect my sources. An anonymous report came to me and reported to me that the executive council of ABAI, that members of it were considering ignoring the vote and just going with the recommendation because it looked like the vote that was coming in, even with them moving the goalposts multiple times, was still looking like it was going towards saying a position statement that electric shock and other aversives is not acceptable. And I'm convinced that the only reason that didn't happen is because I published that I reported on it. I have no proof of that. This is just my opinion. But I'm convinced that the reason why ABAI's executive committee did not do that was because they had external accountability. So ABAI issued a position statement because over 60% of the membership, despite all the goalpost moving, voted against contingent electric skin shock. So you would think that that would be the end of story, because at that point, it's like, okay, Judge Rotenberg Center should not be allowed to present. They're clearly violating our ethics code. They're clearly violating going against the position statement of ABAI now, despite all the manipulation that the leadership of ABAI did. And I still think that we need to do an independent investigation. And when I say independent investigation, I mean truly independent, unbiased, somebody outside of the field.
Yeah.
I don't want to be involved. I don't think that anybody who's a part of the protest should be involved. It needs to be truly independent, because I think that there is some very serious corruption going on. And I don't know that it's money, but money might be a part of it. But there's definitely some corruption happening. So after this happens, ABAI changes it so that in order for you to present, you not only have to pay to enter, but you also have to be a member. I have several people who've been members for years who are like, no, that was never a requirement. This is new. So they're battening down the hatches, and they're trying to reduce the amount of influence, despite them claiming that they're for diversity, equity, and inclusion. But on top of that, guess who's presenting this year at ABAI?
On May 2023.
Judge Rotenberg Center is presenting at ABAI. And they're presenting on counter control and how assent gets in the way of treatment. So they're presenting again on using aversives and disregarding all the research that we're doing that's proving that assent and honoring the individual, respecting the human rights of the individual. They're presenting and saying that that's not okay, that we should be forcing people, we should be hurting people. There's bias at ABAI. There's some very serious problems. There's some very serious ethical problems and moral problems. And the fact that Judge Rotenberg Center is still open and that there's not accountability. The fact that the BACB has not shut Judge Rotenberg Center down for violating the ethics code is very concerning. Why is it that one organization in the entire world that uses this, that hurts people, is able to continue to operate? What is it that's making it so that we're disregarding all of our stuff, all of our ethics?
And they have many BCBAs working for them. So nothing is happening with these BCBAs and their certifications and everything.
Now, the good news is that a law has passed that will make it so the FDA can shut them down, because the reason why they were able to continue using contingent electric skin shock was because a judge ruled that the FDA did not have the authority to determine whether or not something was not an appropriate medical device, which is really confusing to me, considering that that is FDA literally the role of the FDA. But there's now a law that's passed, so there's legal action that's working on shutting them down, and there's other legal action that's taking in other places. But the fact that ABAI continues to low-key support them, the fact that the BACB has not taken action. The fact that this is still happening is a black eye on behavior analysis. It's a shame. We should be ashamed. I am ashamed as a practicing behavior analyst who tries to be human first and human always, who tries to understand and respect the people that I serve. I'm a servant. This is not okay. Also, I was able to look up so correcting on some numbers. Stun guns in the United States, maximum shock is 5 milliamps, not 4.5, my bad. The GED is 30 milliamps, and the GED 4 is 90 milliamps is the maximum shock. So there's some exact numbers for you. And if you want, actually, I'll just drop it in the chat so you can reference the article.
Okay.
Here's the article that got everything kicked off that Judge Rotenberg Center tried issuing the cease and desist for. So now you can reference that. Here's the reality. The reality is that science is a value. Being scientific is about moving towards values. We're curious, we're exploring, we're willing to learn. The reality is that behavior analysis has made mistakes. We've hurt people. We've caused harm. We need to own it. We need to accept that we've hurt, that we screwed up. I accept that I've screwed up. I have not participated in using contingent electric skin shock. I have not used aversives like Judge Rotenberg Center has used, or Behavior Research Institute, or Lovas for that matter. I've not done any of the stuff that they've done. Yet I've made mistakes and I've caused harm, and I own that. Because we have intense power over people's lives. We have a lot of power and privilege. And if we as behavior analysts do not accept that and seek to do better, we're going to cause harm. We're going to hurt people. Science is about exploring, and science is about accepting when we make mistakes. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. And what behavior analysts need to do is we need to learn how to be humble. We need to learn how to own our mistakes. We need to learn how to fix our mistakes as best we can. And what we can't fix immediately, what we can't repair, we learn from, move forward, and do better. Because that's how science works.
Definitely. It's so good for us to learn through this history and have accountability on our mistakes, and not pass the image that the field like it is perfect and we do everything right, and just us, we are scientific, so we need to respect other fields, other areas. So it's really good for us to speak about that, because not so many people want to talk about the mistakes of the field. So we really need to talk about and to reflect on and to assume that and tell what are we doing different from now on. So what has changed, how our behavior has changed. So it's really good, because most of people they don't know that this was happening. They have no idea, because this was happening in another country. But it concerns behavior analysis, and we cannot see like it is in the United States, so it is not our problem. No, it is the problem of the science, and if we study the science, it is our problem.
Well, and it's a problem not only of the science, it's also the problem of humanity.
Yeah.
Because these people, yes, they engage in aggression, they engage in self-injury, right? But they're human.
Yeah.
This is a part of the human experience. There's no justification for hurting somebody just because they're inconvenient.
No.
Like, and what's more, because what we're trying to do is to create conditions where people can thrive. What we're trying to do is to alleviate suffering. Well, guess what? I work for a company that works with the same population that Judge Rotenberg works with. I work with a company that I'm really excited. Melissa at ABAI is going to be presenting, and the title of her presentation is All Appetitives All the Time, or something like that. I could be wrong. The title, I could have gotten it slightly wrong, but Melissa and others are presenting and talking about the complete opposite end to what Judge Rotenberg is talking about, that if we use assent, that some really amazing things can happen. And here's the other side of it. What if the behaviors that are occurring, if we're talking about extreme self-injury and aggression, are controlled by something else? Because there are situations where we encounter confounding variables. And we're learning more about neurology, and we're learning about, like, sometimes people self-injure because there's actual things that are going wrong in other forms of behavior. There are more types of behavior than operant and respondent behavior. We don't try to treat seizures as behavior analysts. That's outside our scope. And there's this false saying that goes around in behavior analysis that we rule out medical. That's not in our ethics code, and that's never been in our ethics code. We don't rule out medical, we account for medical. Accounting is not the same thing as ruling out. And in fact, to go into accounting for medical, because this is a big freaking deal, and this is a part of what I present on, do we understand why the autistic brain is different? What is it that makes the neurology of the autistic brain different? We're starting to understand now. One of the things that makes the autistic brain different is a neuron that research is showing that autistic and possibly ADHD brains have more of. And this neuron is called the von Ecotomo neuron, also known as a VEN, or a spindle neuron. And the reason we discovered this neuron is because researchers with whales found the neuron, because in whales, the neuron was so big that they could see it easily. Wow. And they were like, wait, what does this neuron do? And so the researchers then explored deeper and found out that apes have this neuron, and humans have more of this neuron than any other ape. And now we know that autistics have a concentration that's 2 to 4 times more than other humans. And you know what this neuron has to do with? Sensory processing. It has to do with sensory processing. And the 3 areas of the brain that it's centered in has to do with executive function, and how we process information, and how we reason, and how we do different things. And we're discovering that when you account for the sensory processing needs of the individual, that person gets out of survival mode, they start getting into a place where they're thriving, where they can problem solve. And those conditions that we call autistic or autism spectrum disorder, that if we stop pathologizing it, and if we look at those behaviors as indication that there's something going wrong in the environment. Another correction for you. Tara Vance, the president of Neuroplastic, taught me this. I love Tara. She is a wonderful friend. I am so grateful for her. I'm grateful she was willing to talk to me, even though I was the enemy. I love and respect her. She's amazing. but she taught me that it's wrong to say all behavior is communication, because a seizure is not communicating something. All respondent and operant behavior is an indication. All behavior is an indication that there's something going on. It can be communicative, yes. So let's not rule it out. But all behavior is an indication. So the indication, now that we know a little bit more about the autistic brain, is, oh, there's something wrong with the environment. Let's fix the environment. It's coming full circle back to our own philosophy, to our own foundations. B.F. Skinner's being proven right. We're being proven right. Now, why aren't we using our own freaking science? Why are we throwing it out the window because other people consider autism to be a disorder? It's not a disorder. It's an indication. The autism spectrum disorder, the symptoms are an indication there's something wrong. So what do? We address it. Now, I'm not saying that every person who's autistic is going to magically start talking or magically going to be able to do exactly the same thing as everyone else. The fact of the matter is I'm a very low support need autistic. I am in a place of a lot of privilege, and I have more able-bodiedness than other autistics. At the same time, how much of disability is actually disability and how much of it is created by our environment? Why are we not pushing for more communication rights? We live in a time and a place where we have technology where you and I can speak from two totally different hemispheres, thousands of miles away. We have augmentative communication. I dream of a world where somebody can walk into a restaurant and make an order and hold a conversation using their tablet or whatever their augmentative communication is. And instead of getting weird looks and instead of being treated differently, it's just another part of the day, because that's what that person needs. And I work very closely with other autistics who need that. And my job as somebody who has more privilege, has more power, is to advocate for them when they're struggling, when they need help. Just like my job is to also advocate for a neurotypical person, an allistic person who's also struggling. If I see somebody struggling and I have the power to do something about it, I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to be biased against somebody just because they're a little bit different from me, because I'm human first. I'm human always. I'm not an alien. I never was. And I dream of a world where instead of us being in a place where there are people who feel like they're alienated, we can have a world where we can be included.
And that's the work that we are working for, to make for our kids. So it's the work that we are doing today that will affect our kids, the next generation. And it's necessary. It's really hard. Sometimes we just want to give up, but we need to keep doing and keep doing. If one day we are not good, we can rest and start another day again. And sometimes we can take some days off, but then we keep and starting again and again, because we have many people who needs this, and they are not in a position to advocate for themselves. So we need to do this for them and for the society that our kids will live at. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I think that we will have so much to pass on, to reflect on, to make this content available. I will make sure to put all the links in the description of the YouTube that I will post, and also on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Thank you.
It is an honor to be able to be here and listen to you, because I have so many things to reflect on as a professional and as an autistic mom, and mom of autistic. I don't have a
understood.
diagnosis. The diagnosis. Some people say that, oh, you look so much autistic because you want to stay in your home and you don't want to go out, and you like to stay with your books. And I say, no, I believe that I have anxiety and depression. So I always joke around. I really have. I take medicines on anxiety and depression. um but so as a mom, that my son will grow and be a man, it is not easy to see your son like growing up. You will see that when your child, she grows up. So we have so much to reflect on and to accept these differences, but to really accept, because speak that we are accepting, it is one thing, but to truly to accept from our heart, it is another thing. So
Yeah,
it's something that we need to be working on and be mindful and just keep remembering. So it is not easy. It is a work in progress.
it is. It's an ongoing thing. And
Yeah,
it's a wonderful journey. And I'm excited for the journey. And
yeah.
here's the thing, like if anybody who's here listening who has made mistakes, which all of us have, okay? If anybody here is listening and they've made a mistake, this isn't about feeling shame. Okay? This isn't about making you feel awful. This is about asking, what do you care about? What are your values? What actually matters? Because for me, what matters is that I'm curious, that I'm authentic, and that I create places where people can thrive, including myself. That's what matters to me. Those are my core values. I have other values too. Those are not the only ones. If you're in a place of shame, okay, that's an emotion you're feeling, but I want to invite you to join us, because it's so much better over on this side, on the side of being for human rights, of owning that I've screwed up, that I've done things wrong, and that I can move forward, that I can learn, because that's what behavior science is. Selection through consequence. We can learn. Behavior can change. Behavior analyst, analyze thyself.
We need to apply this more.
Yep.
We need to do what we study and do what we say. So we really need to be better on doing that. So thank you so much. I hope that we can keep talking and we can have a part two and other parts. We have so much to talk on and to reflect, and you have so much to share with us. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to hear you, to talk with you. So just many, many, many thanks for being here with me on a Friday night,
My
uh, in,
pleasure.
instead of resting and being with your family. So thank you so much. I hope we can talk more.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And you have a wonderful night as well.
You too. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.